Hello students, I thought I would record a quick supplement video for you to accompany the samples. That would be the quickest way to clear things up. First of all, I've met with a student in my office and a few students have emailed me about how to manage the multiple facets and the large volume of data in the large data set. As I mentioned in the assignment, you only have to pick two categories of data out of which to make your 4 graphics. So if you pick one table, for example, you could use the content of that table to make 2 different graphics, and then you would pick another table and make 2 other graphics out of that other table. Now you can sub-select information from the table. You don't have to use everything that's contained in a table to make your graphics. You can choose a smaller portion of the data contained in the table to make certain elements of the data stand out more significantly. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. One example might be that you want to select certain programs or certain schools within UNM. Let's say I gave this example to a student, programs associated with health sciences like physical therapy, the nursing program, and the medical school, for example. Those would all be concerned with health sciences, but they might be contained in a table with other information like the Anderson School, undergraduate students. So you might sub-select a certain section of the data in order to make it more relevant for a new audience. In the example I just gave, that new audience might be prospective students, prospective graduate students or undergraduate students interested in a health science related program. So you would hone in on that data to make your new graphic target that specific audience. I hope that makes sense. You do need to record a screen recording. Each student needs to do a screen recording of a meeting. I do say screen recording because most students will be meeting remotely, and so if you're all using Google Hangouts, for example, and you've got all the little windows on the screen indicating that there are several students in the meeting and you screen record that, I'll be able to see that everybody's there. I just want to be able to be sure that A, you know how to use screen recording software, and B, that everybody is participating in these meetings and has a responsibility to creating this documentation of the meeting. If you do meet in person though, and you just want to record 5 minutes of a meeting, just sort of live action, that's fine too. I just need evidence that the group has been meeting. So when you turn in your draft, each student turns in the draft of their group. They turn it in individually, but you're all turning in the same document in the same presentation draft with audio at the draft stage to the peer review discussion board. So I'm going to switch now in this video to show you 2 examples from students from last semester that I did pull up that have the presentation. Okay, so here's the final PDF document of one of the student groups from last semester. You will notice, and I'm going to try to go through this quickly to keep this video rather modest in length, but I've highlighted on this page what they tell me that they will be doing in this document. They say, we took one of the tables from the original data set, and that table was head count by gender and load. And to make it easier to read and understand, they used 4 different graphics: a table, a bar graph, a line graph, and a stratum area graph. So they tell me right up front what it is that they chose and what they're going to do with it. As the assignment said, they could have chosen 2 different sections of data, but they chose just one, and it was plenty. This section I'm showing up at the top, they talk about who the original audience of the graphic was, of the data set was, and then there's a section dedicated to each of the new visualizations that they created. This one is about table, and they actually created 3 tables. A student wrote to me asking if she could create 3 different bar graphs out of one set of data, and absolutely yes. If you need to subdivide the data to make it more easily apprehendable by a new target audience, absolutely do that. And they say right here, we changed the audience from the admissions office at UNM to groups on and off campus that would be interested in statistics about the fluctuation in enrollment based on gender. And they say that specifically. Also, in this group's project, they cite directly from the book. They're very clear in what they do. So here are their new tables, and they're very simple, but that means that they're really easy to understand by a new population of users. Here's the next section about a bar graph, and you see they repeat this strategy of saying what they're doing in this section and why they did it with their graphic. The next one is a line graph. They go through that same process again. And even though 4 different students probably created these originally, they did an excellent job editing their overall ultimate document for uniformity across all sections. And that's one of the criteria in the rubric. Finally, their last one was a stratum area graph. That's what they chose to do. Again, you see some quotes from the text and a rationale for what they're doing. And here is their stratum area graph. And then at the end, and this is excellent, this group scored extremely high on this project. Here's their summary. They conclude with some overarching statements about the importance of the original data set and the repurposed data as they show it. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is another group. This is another group that did very well, not quite as well as the first. They didn't do as excellent a job at creating uniformity across all 4 sections, but they also did a really great job. So I've highlighted here that it says we created 4 different types of graphics: table chart, line graph, bar graph, and pictograph, using the data from head count by gender and level. So while doing so, they say what they're going to do in each section. And then they say, due to the overwhelming data set, the original set of tables, which you all agree probably that it's overwhelming, they decided to break down the data into 4 different sections. And so these categories dictate what their new data representations focus on. They include their original table. Not all groups do that, but they chose to. And then they have their new table. They also quote from Markel. That works really well. They refer to the table in their paragraphs of analysis. And as I scroll through, you can see that they've created visual uniformity with color scheme across the graphics, as well as in a very clean, repeated style in the document itself. I know what the headings look like. I know what the body text looks like. So that was very nicely done by this group. The last thing I want to show you is the presentation by this group. And they also have a conclusion, which is excellent. They included the link to their presentation video at the end of their PDF. You can do it there. You just have to make sure you do it somewhere. You can put it in that little text box in the submission pane. But here's their presentation. I'm just going to show you just a few seconds of it, just so you can hear how it all hangs together.
And the data was composed from the head count by gender and level. The purpose of this presentation is to create a data visualization of a person selected from February 5th, 2006, from the University of New Mexico Spring 2016 Official Enrollment Report.
So this was from the introduction. They have a few slides in the introduction, and they tell me the rationale for what they did. This particular student's voice isn't particularly loud, and you'll notice that the next student has a much louder voice, but they were able to combine all of the audio files into a single presentation, and they have nice transitions between slides. One thing I say in the assignment is that the voiceover in the video presentation should not just be reading verbatim from your PDF report. You have to do things differently in the medium of a presentation. Hopefully that makes sense. Presentations do different things than documents do. So I'll show you a little bit more in this video.
Of data from the original table that we saw earlier, we thought it best to compile the data into an easier, more understandable graph for an audience seeking current large picture values.
Okay, and I'll just skip to the end just so you can see how they conclude.
It helps the audience make connections. Not only do we have all the hard data in these visuals, but it helps people grasp the idea better.
Okay, so quickly you just heard another student synthesizing the concepts that were conveyed throughout the document but presented in the presentation. I'm going to conclude this now. Hopefully I've answered many of the questions that you have. If you still have questions, reach out to me and I'll be happy to answer them.